Well, greetings and welcome to the Dividing Line. It is a week out from the debate next Thursday evening with Stone Choir cult leader Corey Mahler. I'm not going to apologize for saying those things. I think that's going to be fully vindicated in the comments and the conversation as it takes place. Yeah, that'll be a week from today. Just here at the beginning of the program. Have to extend our condolences to two folks that I've had positive interaction with on social media. One fella I've really enjoyed. It's nice when folks help lighten things up, and they do it well with finding funny memes that you end up repeating or sending off to your family or doing whatever. There's a guy, Savagely Average, that has done that for a long time. I've enjoyed his feed, and his lovely wife passed away just a few days ago. She had open heart surgery, so those things. When my mom passed, she had a heart attack, and they had put her in a rehabilitation place, and she died just a few days later from another massive heart attack after the first one. And so the heart's an amazing thing, but we can do amazing things for it. I mean, I'm a heart patient. I had cardiac ablation in 2011. It didn't work, but I had it. And then Ken Five Solas, Pastor Ken, online again, a good brother that we've had good conversations with, just announced just a few moments ago that his wife had a heart attack and that she's passed away. And I mean, just within the past hour. And so we extend our condolences. And normally what I say to people, may the God of all comfort be with you. That's such beautiful language that the Apostle Paul used, the God of all comfort. And I don't know that we think a lot about that. I'm not going to do my grieving presentation today. I did write a book on the subject, and it's helped a lot of people, and I've had at least 4 different people come up to me in the 20 some odd years or more since I wrote it. Well more than that, because now I think about it, they were passing that book out by the carton load at Ground Zero on September 13th, 2001. So that was 24 years ago, coming up on 24 years. I've had at least 4 people come up to me that said that that book kept them from committing suicide. Now, obviously, it wasn't the book. It was the Lord using that book. But doing presentations on grieving and things like that has just always been one of the hardest things. Being a hospital chaplain was one of the hardest things I ever did. There's no question about that. And so I'm not going to go back through all that, but I will just comment that this is an area where the church struggles, and it shouldn't. We have such a wealth of resources in the scriptures on this subject, but I think it's one area where we are so deeply influenced by the culture, and our culture does not handle death well at all. We basically say, hey, we'll give you 2 weeks off, and come back to work after that, and everything needs to be right back to where it was. You need to be done with your grieving, and honestly, you don't even start grieving till 2 weeks or more. You're in the shock stage before then, and there's just so much that the scriptures tell us that it's better to spend a day in the house of mourning than in a house of feasting. But we don't do that. We often won't take our kids to funerals because we don't want to bother them or depress them or something. No, I think one of the biggest problems that has developed in American culture and society over the past 80 to 100 years, maybe a little more, has been, up until that time, you lived in the same house, the same family. You saw your great-grandparents die. You saw your grandparents die. You saw death. And there was much more infant mortality. You lost brothers and sisters. There were accidents on the farm, you saw death. And when you think back to the Reformation, why were people so concerned about indulgences and purgatory and justification and how you have peace with God? Because you saw death all the time. The plague was still running around. And the memory of the great plague itself was still fresh in many people's minds, and then it would keep coming through the town, and it just, we entertain ourselves into numbness about mortality. We are so used to just popping a pill, taking a drug, and then you distract your mind with movies and music, and I think the generations after mine just don't even know what it is to have silence for any period of time. Always got something in their ears, always listening to something to keep that meditative silence away. Because when that happens, you have to start thinking about who you are, how much longer you expect to live. Everybody knows in the back of their mind, every time they get into a vehicle and start rolling down the road, you may not understand potential energy. You may not understand how that works, but you press that accelerator and you're converting chemical energy into mechanical energy, which infuses your body with potential energy. And when you're whipping down the road at 65 miles per hour and all of a sudden you come to a screeching halt, and I don't mean screeching halt, I mean you run into something, the reason you die is because your body explodes, because you're full of potential energy and you didn't dissipate it appropriately by using brakes. And Tom Buck last week had to do that funeral for someone, a young man, 24, 25 years old, a police officer in their church, motorcycle accident. And he didn't get up that morning expecting to enter into eternity. None of his friends or family expected that either. But every single one of us, when we get into a vehicle, we don't even think. We suppress the knowledge of the fact that you are not alone on that road. And I don't know about the rest of you, but it seems like the driving skills of the population are diminishing rapidly. They really, really are. And I especially think about that, given how I travel these days. But anyway, the point is, we just don't, we ignore death. We put it away. We spend billions and billions of dollars to hide its effects upon our bodies. And so when death comes, even in the church, we are not, there's much wisdom to be found in the house of mourning, far more than in the house of feasting. I'm not saying there's something wrong with the house of feasting, but when that's all we want, when we won't even go to the house of mourning, that tells you a lot. And the difference between Christians and non-Christians is real simple. It's not that we do not grieve. It's that we do not grieve without hope. Anyone old enough to love is old enough to grieve the loss of the object of their love. So we do grieve, but we don't grieve as a world. We grieve in hope. And that makes all the difference in the world. It really, really does. So to our brothers who are grieving today, beginning that process, we pray for God's comfort upon you both. And there are many others that we don't know. Sometimes we see things on Twitter and you don't know the people, but you're like, oh Lord, undertake for your people. So, all right. And then we have, of course, as you saw today, a new pope has been selected very, very quickly. Very, very quickly, which as soon as I heard that there was white smoke, I'm like, wow, that was quick. That almost seems like it was sort of a done deal, from the start. And I don't know a lot about this fellow, first American Pope, which is quite interesting. Most everything that I'm seeing is that he's pretty much in the line of Francis. He was put in that position by Francis. We'll see. I mean, it's not just the Pope. It's also the people that the Pope has around him. Will Tucho Fernandez still be involved in leadership, stuff like that? Who knows? The next number of months will give us some indication of which direction things are going. Was this a compromise move? Was this, some of the conservatives putting their foot down saying you got to do this, but they were pretty much completely outvoted. I mean, 85% of the cardinals had been selected by Francis, and so we'll find out. It'll be interesting to see. Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost, might be Provost, I suppose. I haven't been listening to the news. Sorry, got other things to be going on. I'm just reading stuff online. Though it did strike me as strange. Pope Leo the 14th. Okay. There have been some very interesting Pope Leos. There really, really, really have been a lot of interesting Pope Leos. But the one that strikes me is Pope Leo the 10th. And, he's got to know something about the history of these names. I would imagine he went in there knowing that he probably was going to become Pope, or at least had a really good chance of it. So it's not like, oh, well, now I got to come up with a name. I imagine that was something that was thought of a long time ago. And so Leo the 10th, if you're not up on your Leos, if you're not real big on remembering all of your papal names, Pope Leo X was the Pope that wrote a certain rather famous papal encyclical called Exsurge Domine. Arise, O Lord, a wild boar has broken out in your vineyard. That was the excommunication of Martin Luther. And prior to that, a few years prior to that, that was the same Pope that Erasmus had dedicated the first printing of his Novum Instrumentum, his Greek-Latin diglot, which came out in 1516. And the reason he dedicated it to the Pope was because he didn't follow the standard procedures of sending it to the Vatican to get it approved before it was published. They knew that Cardinal Jimenez was already in that process. His multi-volume, beautiful work had already been printed and was sitting in boxes in a storehouse, waiting papal approval. And they wanted to beat that. They wanted to get his out first, and so they took a chance. They took a risk, dedicated it to Pope Leo X, and published it, and got away with it. But same Pope. And I didn't take the time to look at it because I'm working on other stuff right now, obviously. But I'm fairly certain, could be wrong, but again, I could look it up pretty quickly, but I'm thinking it was the same Pope, though that would be a long period of time, that scandalized Luther in 1510. When Luther went to Rome, and remember, to go to Rome in those days, if you're a monk, meant you walked from Germany to Rome. That's a long trip, long walk. He went to Rome, and he was scandalized by how Rome was, how corrupt Rome was, how corrupt the priests were. And he saw the Pope riding by in armor. and he was, that was part of the process. That sort of helped start the process of moving Luther to at least to a position where he could sort of look at the church in a way that allowed him to sort of go, hey, it was Julius II was the one he saw. Okay, I didn't figure that would have been a really long pontificate for him to have been able to pull that off. But anyway, there was a lot of corruption there, and so that was what was dinging. Was my watch dinging at me? I'm not sure how to turn that off. Anyway, so I did find the name interesting because of the fact that Leo was the one that excommunicated Martin Luther. I'm not sure if that has any meaning whatsoever, but that, like I said, some of the earlier Leos had been very powerful popes. So we will see what happens. I made the mistake. Well, I guess it's not a mistake, but I attempted to get Stephen Wolfe to actually say something meaningful in social media, which evidently is not something he's interested in doing. In essence, he had posted a statement, and I'll have to come back. Did you see the Salt Lake stuff? Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall, Democrat. When we first started going up there, there was no way a female Democrat was going to be elected as mayor of Salt Lake City. That wasn't going to happen. Has proposed adopting 3 new flags as official city flags in order to circumvent Utah state law banning political and non-official flags from government buildings. The 3 flags are the Pride flag, transgender flag, and the Juneteenth flag. And it passed. And so they did it. And so those are now official flags for Salt Lake City. The rumbling you hear is Brigham Young spinning in his grave. There is absolutely no two ways about that. She would fully come to understand the doctrine of blood atonement and the Danites if she lived in Brigham Young's day. I can guarantee you that. Wow. What can I say? And I'm going to get to the Stephen Wolfe thing. 1312 passed. Again, Democrats, leftists don't care about constitutions and law, and they'll take stuff out, get it passed, and then quickly throw it all back in and hope nobody notices. And of course, the governor of Colorado is going to sign anything that's perverted. So, as it was expressed by the Center for Baptist Leadership, a bill to criminalize Christianity, destroy parental rights, and create a state-sponsored persecution regime in Colorado has passed its final vote. It will now go to Governor Polis for his signature. And truly, once again, I've got people. Thank you for the contacts we've gotten. We're going to push on trying to find a representative. If you're to ask me what percentage success rate do you think we're going to have? What's the chance of getting somebody to actually debate this bill publicly? I would say 20%. I'd say we might have a 20% chance of finding somebody. I'm trying to be positive there. It's probably less than that. And why? because they know they've already won the public, not the public argument, but they have the media in their pocket. They have the universities. And so why should they expose themselves? They don't need, why should they expose themselves? A little double entendre there. They don't need to do debates. They don't need to engage in argumentation. They're getting what they want, not through argumentation at all. They're getting what they want through attacking language, by redefining safety and love, and they redefine these words, which in a debate you get challenged on. If the other person knows what in the world a debate is supposed to be, and you have cross-examination, you get challenged. That's not going to happen in the media. That's not going to happen in the Senate hearing rooms where one side speaks, the other side speaks, but there's never really any meaningful exchange. And when there is, it's almost always very much emotionally oriented. So I'm not sure if that's a possibility, but we're going to hope that it will take place. So, getting back to Stephen Wolfe, all I see, whenever I say anything, the comments are, just shut up and debate him. And I just go, I want to go, shut up and tell me what I'm supposed to debate him on. It's just, what are you talking about? We've talked about this before. Even A.D. Robles got into it. I don't know if you saw this, but I mentioned some of the actual topics that would need to be addressed. I know Jeff Durbin would be happy to debate him on theonomy. I'd be happy to debate him on presuppositional apologetics, which he says is inconsistent with Reformed tradition, which I think just demonstrates how ignorant he is of apologetics. He's never done any debating. He doesn't engage in that kind of stuff. It's not his area, but he likes to talk about it anyway. And some online folks had contacted him, and the only topic he came up with was something along the lines of, if would having almost everybody being Christian in a society be enough to build a governmental system, something along those lines. I could come up with the exact wording. I have it here someplace, but I won't right now. And it was vague. It was not really debatable in any formal sense, and it demonstrated a complete misunderstanding of what I've said. He criticizes what he calls revivalism. The idea that if there is a major move of the Spirit of God that results in the conversion of the nations, that's going to have an impact on how those nations are going to seek God's blessing and things like that, which we do not see at this point in time. That's not happening right now. And so he seems to think that all I'm saying is that you don't have to have the same language, you don't have to have similar cultural institutions. It's just if everybody's a Christian. But if everybody's a Christian, then what are their standards going to be? What is going to drive their worldview? What is going to be the concern of the nation? It's not going to be like it is right now in the United States, where it's, how much money do I get? How much money am I going to be able to get out of the government? I mean, that's just, be honest, that's where a large portion of the population is today. And no nation can survive that for very long. Everything would change, but it would be those changes that would be taking you to theonomy. That would be taking you, and of course, all this goes back to how do you know what you know? Epistemology, presuppositionalism, which again, it's very plain to me he doesn't understand. So, he posted something on Twitter. It said, as normal, it was short. The guys who attacked Gnosticism, in scare quotes, for decades are now telling us that by grace, we're all the same. That's it. One sentence. So he doesn't identify who the guys are, so you can get to fill that in whatever you want. Who are the guys who attacked Gnosticism for decades? Who is that? I mean, there are people who use the term Gnosticism all the time that have never read any original Gnostic documents. They couldn't meaningfully describe for you the difference between the original, earliest form of Gnosticism as it came out of the East and Valentinian Gnosticism, which purposefully attempts to be as much like Christianity as possible. They couldn't tell you why. They couldn't tell you the difference between Yahweh and Yaldabaoth. They don't know anything about the eons and what Sophia did that resulted in the birth of the demiurge. They don't know anything about it. They've not read any of that stuff. But it is common for people to say that any distinction between the spiritual and the physical means you're a Gnostic. And while Gnosticism was definitely dualistic, that's not what Gnosticism is in its essence. Greek religion was dualistic too, but not all Greek religion was Gnosticism. So there's a huge amount of confusion on that subject. And so to say the guys who attack Gnosticism for decades doesn't tell you anything. Now, does he have somebody in mind? Well, this was posted shortly after I preached Sunday afternoon at Apologia, and I preached from Colossians 3. And so, have I attacked Gnosticism and spoken on it and lectured on it and identified elements of it within this? Remember how stuff we did with the Ken Wilson stuff, with Manichaeism and stuff like that, and it imbibing elements of Gnosticism, but coming up with some wild stuff. Yeah, pooping that light. Just, woohoo! I just had to bring that up. Well, I did, and if you want to know what that's all about, look it up. It's in the archives. It was during the lockdowns in 2020. That would have been April, May of 2020, I think. And we were doing like 4 or 5 programs a week. There wasn't anything else to do, and yeah, we were getting into it. It was wild stuff. So, anyways, yeah. If you put pooping in the search engine, it probably will. That's about the only thing that's gonna pull up. Come to think of it. Yeah. Look, they saw the Milky Way. They saw the lights in the sky, and it has to do with lights returning to the realm of light. And yeah, it was Manichaeism is just whacked. Okay, and to say that that's where Calvinism came from is even more whacked. It's just like, oh, okay, right. Anyhow, how do we get it? Okay, so the guys who attacked Gnosticism for decades, I guess that could be me, are now telling us that by grace we're all the same. Well, I suppose a superficial, maybe secondhand listening of what I said in my sermon might lead someone to make a statement like that. Because I was talking about Colossians chapter 3 and how there is no distinction whatsoever in the renewal of the new man by the Holy Spirit of God amongst the saints, amongst the elect of God. I mean, it's just a straight out statement from Colossians chapter 3. Just read it for yourself, where Paul belabors the reality, 3:10, 11, 12, that there is no distinction, that barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, Jew, Gentile, circumcised, uncircumcised, there's no distinction. The Spirit of God is doing the same thing in all the elect of God, which is renewing them, renewing the new man in the image of the one that created them. So I suppose you could say that telling us that by grace we're all the same. Well, that's not saying that we're all the same, as in the same individual or undifferentiated, or that God hasn't called some of us to one role in the kingdom and another part in the service of the body. That's not what I was saying. I was saying that when we come to the the table, when we come to the supper, we come on the exact same grounds with no distinctions. And you can see why that's relevant given what we're going to be doing a week from now. Very, very central. So anyway, so who is this about? I don't know. So I asked him a question. I said, it's been my observation you tend to post statements that are vague, easily misunderstood, and rarely provide a foundation for truly serious discussion. Having said that, I would like to ask you who specifically you are referring to. Who has attacked Gnosticism for decades? True Gnosticism has been the enemy of the Christian faith since the apostles. Of course, there was no single Gnosticism, and battling original Gnostic ideas is somewhat different than battling Valentinian Gnosticism or many of the modern mutations thereof. Secondly, who is saying that by grace we're all the same? In what context? By intentionally not providing context, you invite speculation, even division. Are you referring to us all being of one humanity, one standing before God? Are we talking about believers in the body of Christ? I preached a sermon yesterday afternoon from Colossians 3, where Paul specifically says there's one renewal by the Spirit, in which there are, in fact, no distinctions whatsoever. All are renewed by the Spirit by the same means, upon the same grounds, and for the same purpose, Christ-likeness. You have often made passing references to me without naming me, a bit of a game for you, I surmise. How about coming out and speaking plainly for once? Answer? Nothing. No response. He can post anything he wants. Doesn't matter. Some people said, well, he was talking about James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson. And I'm like, really? How do you know that? Since he won't say, how can anyone know? I don't know. But, well, there had been a clip had been posted somewhere around that time, so it's certainly not impossible. But no response. But all sorts of people who want to comment say, oh, I know. So what he means is plain. A guy named Peter Ricketts says. What he means is plain. Recon types have been calling anything that downplays the physical and outward Gnostic. Then, when someone addresses the outward and physical in a way they are uncomfortable with, those same recon types treat the outward and physical as irrelevant. I no idea. Then Jesse G. When's the debate? That's just happens all the time. It's just something. I don't even think half these people actually exist. I think there are bots that just look for this. Just go, throw that out there. Cromwell Jr., I'm old and fat and don't understand how the internet works. Yeah, that's deep, isn't it? Yeah, wouldn't know anything about Cromwell for anything, but anyway. So I didn't get a response. So it's like, how do you take someone like this seriously? How do you even engage with someone like this seriously? It's hard to say. So here we go. Yeah. Where'd it go? Oh, I did repost that Reggie Miller. That was 30 years ago. If someone had told me to guess, I was said 20, maybe at the most. 30 years ago. So there was another one that was posted, and I didn't bother to. Yeah, here we go. Here's what he said. He said, presuppositionalism is correct that people operate out of background assumptions. But those assumptions are not conceptual. They are more like mental habits or assumptions enmeshed with their experience of the world, viz. They have a world in the phenomenological sense. Simply affirming the right concepts does not itself eradicate these assumptions. Objective contradiction does not eliminate what is ingrained subjectively. It takes self-awareness and active mental suppression, and more often than not, the concepts we come to affirm arise from these unrealized and uncriticized background assumptions. That's why, quote, Christian worldview, end quote, today is typically a form of liberalism. The problem, now remember, the problem is that presups think that getting the concepts right is the key when it's actually either active mental suppression, which few will do, or dominating the culture from which most people acquire their assumptions about the world. But in my experience, critiquing these modern background assumptions is grounds to be called pagan or unchristian, even by the worldview opponents. Now, I don't know what vast majority of that is even supposed to mean. He either just assumes that everyone has listened to everything he's ever said and that he actually has been clear in what he is saying, or he's just a horrible communicator. Just horrible. I don't know. So I, again, responded to that, and I was fairly brief this time. I said, I would ask Dr. Wolfe to engage with his statements, but evidently he views X merely as a place to ruminate, not to actually interact. I may have missed Wolfe's debates with atheists, secularists, etc., but I sort of doubt I did. One thing's for certain, his grasp of the apologetic and epistemological issues relevant to presuppositionalism is, well, lacking. So, you know, when everybody, and so again, you should debate him so everyone can see and hear what only you currently envision with your mind. It's just like, you know, it's funny, you know, if that's coming from him, that's interesting. I don't think it's coming from him. I don't think he's the one going, we need to do debates, because I don't get the feeling he's a good debater at all. I really don't. From the people who've listened to him speak, he's not compelling. So I don't know. It's pretty strange. But again, there are certain topics that could be debated. But I especially think that it would be good to do this in person. So, again, Brother Durbin has plainly expressed his interest in debating Wolfe on theonomy. I'd be happy to defend presuppositionalism. Those aren't his areas. I mean, he knows next to nothing about theonomy, so he'd be very unwise to do that. And I like I just said there, he'd be very unwise to seek to debate me on the subject of presuppositionalism. One of the reasons being, at least I've actually taken that out and done it. You know, as far as I can tell, he doesn't do that. So, even from his own perspective. So, I don't know. But what people want is, well, we want a Christian nationalism debate. Okay. What specifically? Because evidently the big thing would be, well, let's have a debate over Christian princes. And I'd be like, well, we don't have anybody to look at right now. You people want a Protestant Franco, which is scary. You're playing the same game as the Roman Catholic integralists are right now, who are the Christian nationalists on the papal side. And they're all over the place right now with the Pope and stuff. All this kind of stuff. And okay. Just something popped up that thought might be relevant, but wasn't. About all we could do would be do something like, all right, so, and I don't know that he would ever respond to this to even get to the point of even asking the question, but do you believe that it was proper from a biblical foundation for the Canton of Geneva to burn the heretic Miguel Servetus to death? Now, Servetus had been condemned by the Inquisition. The night before his burning, he escaped and made a beeline for Geneva. And so I have defended Calvin many times on this level. I have said the reformers were sacralists. They had imbibed this from what came before. They weren't coming up with something new here. But that doesn't change the fact that you didn't wipe out Servetus's heresy by burning him. And it does seem to me that most Christian nationalists, even the ones that are much more friendly, are like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, that the magistrate should carry the sword to punish evildoers. And heresy's evildoing, and therefore the state should punish heretics by killing them. Now, that was the exact same reasoning that led to many Baptist martyrs at the hands of both Catholics and Protestants before, during, and after the Reformation. Well, it couldn't have been before the Protestants, but you get what I'm saying. And so the Baptist martyrology, which is very extensive, came about because of a belief that Romans 13 was saying that it is the church's role, the state's role, to punish heresy. And you have to accept the idea of development in theology to come to that conclusion, because it's clearly not in the New Testament. When Paul's talking to Felix, he's talking to him about righteousness and the coming judgment. He's not saying, hey, you need to be using the power of the state to suppress the proto-Gnostic heretics or whatever, other heresies. Go get the Judaizers. It was the Judaizers trying to get him. He was in prison because the Judaizers were sacralists, and they were using the government to suppress Christianity. So, unless you're going to argue, yeah, and Paul was trying to just turn that around the other way to use the government to get rid of them. I don't see that one. I don't think so. Well, but the Westminster Confession says there was still a fair amount of, there was a Baptist burned or drowned, I forget which one it was, in London in 1611. So you're only talking 30 years later. Sacralism doesn't just disappear. And as you know, there's a difference between the original Westminster Confession and the American one on issues just like this, where the amount of sacralism left in the original Westminster Confession was still more than the Americans could survive. They could allow to have happened, so you had that change made. So, maybe something about Servetus and about Fritz Erba. I mean, Fritz Erba is a good example of a, contemporaneous, and in fact, Erba dies before Servetus, but in a little bit of a different context, just basically thrown into a hole till he dies instead of burning him. And the level of heresy and the subject of the heresy, very different. Servetus was a heretic. Servetus tried to get Calvin killed. Servetus was a dangerous man. There's no two ways about that. But Fritz Erba was a farmer, okay? He just wanted to live a Christian life, and he didn't want to baptize his kids. He had read the New Testament as it had been published, as it had been translated by Martin Luther himself, and goes, yeah, that don't teach nothing about baptizing babies. And he was right about that. It doesn't take a great theological mind to go, nah, I don't think so. You got to do a lot of theological wrangling to go, well, you take that, and you take that, and take that, and you put it, and there you go. It takes work. That's why it's always easier for me. Remember what happened last summer, when we debated New Covenant in Hebrews? What was the primary response? Well, it's easier for you. Yeah, Hebrews. Yeah, it sounds like. But you got to go to a lot of other places. See, you can't just go to where the New Covenant's actually defined. You got to go to a lot of other places. Okay. The man lost his life over that. So was that appropriate? Was that proper? Is that something? The easiest debate thesis would be: is that something that can be derived and still believe in sola scriptura? Because No, you can't drive that and actually believe in sola scriptura at the same time. That's pretty tough to do. Who knows? Something along those lines. I don't know, but it's tiring to keep running into. I'm just going to start assuming they're bots. Someone has set up some type of a server farm someplace, and it's just they because they've got 23 followers, and they run in and go, well, just debate him, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, oh, shut up. It's just, you people are nuts. Oh, by the way, and just in passing, I didn't even know about this, but there's a wonderful young professor at IRBS, Timothy Decker, teaches Greek and textual criticism, stuff like that. Needs a new heart. Congenital heart malfunction. And he's in the ICU waiting for a heart. And I mean, I think he's younger than my son. I really do. Real nice guy. Let's pray for Timothy Decker that they're able to find a match, and that he's able to get that surgery, because he really, really needs it. Evidently, while he's in ICU, he somehow stumbled across my Fritz Erba YouTube video, the less than 5 minute thing, and he says, "Why have I never seen this? So powerful! I bet those guys had visible shudders and chills. Great stuff." And I retweeted it because that was a powerful video that we did. I remember that day very, very clearly. I really do. It was. Well, yeah. I mean, they're looking down that hole, man. Well, yeah. You're looking down that hole, going, "Oh man, what would I do? How would I respond? Would I possibly have stayed down that hole for 7 years over baptism? I mean, you could come up with a lot of different ways to go, yeah, well, I think maybe, we could find another way of doing that one. We'll come up with, beta baptism isn't all that bad. And then there you go. Okay, now, got to find this thing here. There we go. What was the date on this? May 7th. So yesterday morning, Joel Webbon posted a tweet that he's now written a big, long, I understand why people misunderstood what I wrote. And I'm like, guys, I'll be honest with you. Are you all studying at the Stephen Wolfe School of Obscurantism or something? I mean, honestly, is it really that difficult to write something with some level of clarity? It just seems like the idea is throw out a statement that's right on the edge, and then when everybody responds, I'm sort of wondering, have they monetized their accounts? Because my understanding is when people respond to you, the bigger if someone has a lot of followers and they interact with you, that really kicks up your status or your income. I really have to wonder about it, because why else would you do this? Why else would you put stuff out there? It's right on the edge. It can be interpreted in some pretty bad ways. And then it's like, oh, no, I would never, no. But by then there's been all this interaction, which would be really good for your bottom line. I'm really starting to wonder if that, because my account is not monetized. Our YouTube is not monetized. No. So I have a reason to try to be clear. Now, sometimes people go, oh, I didn't understand this one. That's because it was like the fourth tweet in a context. They hadn't even bothered to read what came before. Nothing you can do about that. But this is a one-off. Here's the one-off. If you're a heterosexual white male and you're excommunicated from a Protestant church in 2025, there's a 99% chance it was because you're actually a real Christian. If you're a heterosexual male, ... blank space, and you're excommunicated from a Protestant church in 2025, ... blank space, there's a 99% chance it was because you're actually a real Christian. So a lot of us jumped on that. Needed to. Anybody who's involved in ministry. Because it is clearly so vague that it could be understood that this is a blanket statement that could be taken by anyone who comes under church discipline. I'm a victim. The church is victimizing me. I'm the real Christian. And we see this all the time. Church discipline issues, look, if anyone plays games with these things, it's obvious to me they've never actually been involved with them with the right motives. Because churches that do church discipline, that do honest, we're talking counseling, meetings, investing of time, bring it before the church, and then the final act of excommunication. Everybody involved in ministry who has had to go through that knows it is the most heart-rending, energy-sapping, joy-removing experience that you go through. I mean, some things, performing marriages and seeing new families starting and greeting new babies and grandbabies and all that's all wonderful stuff. But man, the counterbalance is right there. And it's having to do church discipline. Most of the time it's from sexual sin. It's from inappropriate divorces, adultery, fornication, maybe things like theft or abandonment. That happens a lot. Not nearly as much for rumor mongering, slandering, gossip, though those are very much listed in the New Testament as things that destroy churches. And nobody who takes all that seriously jokes about it. It's sort of like, when Saving Private Ryan came out many years ago, there are lots of stories about, because this was, man, how many years ago was that now? Over 20. There were still veterans of the D-Day invasion alive. And there were stories about how many of them were coming out of the theaters in tears, had to leave before the movie was over, stuff like that, because it was so real. But also because they had never talked about it. The people that survived that were on those beaches, they weren't the ones running around writing books and doing movies. They didn't talk about it. And I knew that generation. And I knew people who lived through that stuff. They didn't sit around talking about it because it was too horrible. They didn't want to. And so if you've gone through just heartbreaking examples of having to do church discipline, trying to recover people from where they're going wrong, you don't joke about stuff like this. And you don't use it as a ploy like this. You just don't. And so, I responded to it and I said, this is how'd I put it? Tom Askell did too, pretty much said the same things I did. I said, I confess I have no idea how anyone with a scintilla of actual pastoral experience navigating the heartbreaking yet necessary process of church discipline, could even contemplate posting something this utterly vacuous. The liberals who would be woke don't do excommunications to begin with, and so you're only left with sound churches seeking to apply God's law and God's standards to the target of this foolishness. Just utterly amazing. So it wasn't a big, long thing, but I was just like, this is foolishness. So what you get, the comments just start filling up. How many? 85 comments just on that one statement. I had a friend during COVID, and he got kicked out of his church because he wouldn't wear a mask. That's not what the OP was talking about. It's not what the original post was talking about, was it? I have a friend, and his son came out as homosexual, and he did the proper biblical thing, and the church supported the homosexual, and he committed suicide. Someone actually said that. I said, okay, how does that even qualify as a Protestant church? That was one of the things, was Protestant church. What's that? Is the United Methodist Church a Protestant church? Is it even a church? United Church of Christ? PCUSA? Episcopalians? That's why the lack of clarity, the lack of specificity was so clear. I mean, honestly, you mean they did the same things we would do? You know, biblical counseling? No, of course they weren't doing any of that kind of stuff. Yes, the woke churches will throw you out if you're Orthodox. What are you doing there in the first place? Seriously, what? Why would any heterosexual, white, male, serious Christian be in a woke nutcase church to begin with? Again, this was because you write it in such a way as to allow all of this, then you can duck and dodge and go, well, I didn't mean this, well, I didn't mean that. So he wrote this big, long response to me. Every church excommunicates. Every single one. True churches, false churches, all. That's not true. Simply not true. He's obviously decided that he has the authority to redefine what excommunication means. Okay. Some of us silly people were, using sola scriptura and allowing the Bible to define this stuff. He did say, he said, there were plenty of perfectly reasonable objections to the lack of clarity in my original post. Well, okay, that's nice, I suppose, on some level. But I honestly do think it was intentional. Anyways, he says, over the years, I've spoken to dozens, if not over 100 Christians that were kicked out of their seeker-friendly megachurches simply for holding to Reformed theology and sharing with others in their small groups. I've not met a single one that was formally excommunicated. I have had people that said, would you please leave? You can't teach here anymore, etc., etc. But to actually bring them up on theological charges, I suppose it's happened. And then they were more than happy to leave. But what does that have to do with being a male heterosexual in 2025? For being a real Christian? You are absolutely changing well, again, you purposefully put it out there so you can change the topic to whatever you want. Oh, let's make it about Reformed theology. It has nothing to do with Reformed theology. Had nothing to do with it at all. In other words, it is certainly true that only biblically faithful churches excommunicate biblically, but all churches, companies, organizations, etc. have ways of removing people. Now you're totally changing everything now. Talk about, you didn't just move the goalpost, you put it in a different stadium. And they all do so regularly. Would such a church, a biblically faithful one, excommunicate someone for being a faithful Christian? Yes, absolutely yes. Emphatically yes. Luther was a faithful Christian. He was excommunicated in 2020. Hold on. Luther was a faithful Christian. He would be excommunicated in 2025 by most Reformed churches. Luther would be excommunicated by a lot of Lutheran churches. Okay. But Luther, look, I've stood in the room where the Marburg Colloquy took place. And it was Luther that was pounding his finger on the tabletop. Hoc est corpus meum, this is my body. And the people there, in general, recognized Zwingli had the better arguments and was much more respectful to Luther. So Luther wouldn't join a Reformed church and hence would not be excommunicated by a Reformed church. So it doesn't, historically, you just go, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Calvin was a faithful Christian. He would be excommunicated in 2025 by most Reformed churches. Edwards was a faithful Christian. He would be excommunicated in 2025 by most Reformed churches. Dabney was a faithful Christian. He would be excommunicated in 2025 by most Reformed churches. So evidently, what he wanted to do was he wasn't talking about Protestant churches. He was talking about Reformed churches. So if you're in a Reformed church and you get excommunicated, according to Joel Webbon, it's probably because you're a true Christian, which would mean that the people in most Reformed churches are not true Christians, right? Right? So here's the kicker. Sadly, many churches, even Reformed churches, have, albeit often unknowingly, blended several aspects of 20th century liberalism, read post-war consensus, with Scripture, such as Israel, Jews, One key point in my original post is my designation of the year 2025. I do not believe this has always been the case, even in recent years. Oh, so something fascinatingly new is taking place. However, I believe we are quickly reaching a crux. There is a massive return to older views that many Christians have held throughout history. So that's them. Webbon did this thing about the Gideon. They're in the phase 2 of the Gideon thing, and there's going to be people leaving them, but they're the ones pressing forward, and they're doing all this stuff. And so older views. By the way, this is exactly what Corey Mahler says too. It just happens to be the same thing. Not just topics such as nationality, race, and Israel, but traditional views regarding men and women and the biblical teaching of patriarchy. So, now what happened here? I must have, when you copy stuff out of Twitter, things disappear. And something did disappear. It's disappeared smack dab in the middle of the sentence. Sorry, I can't finish reading that. But that happens when copying to plain text. Anyway, so this is the idea. We, this group, they believe that they are leading a reformation. They really do. And they are coming out of Reformed churches. They used to identify themselves as Reformed churches. But if you just read this, would be excommunicated in 2025 by most Reformed churches. So we are not most Reformed churches. We are charting our own course. We're going a new direction. And we are departing from the Reformed churches. I'm not sure what they're going to be calling themselves, but we are departing. And our accusation is that these Reformed churches are themselves in apostasy, that they would excommunicate true believers like us, and that their apostasy is some kind of, they have blended several aspects of 20th century liberalism with Scripture. Well, be specific. I'm getting tired of longhouse conversations and all the rest of this stuff. Get the Bible out. Well, and do something more than what y'all have been doing. Because what y'all have been doing has been really bad. Okay. Yeah, like I said, for some reason, what I copied picked up something else, put it below that. This kind of throw stuff out and then pretend that you've been misrepresented and you're now a victim and all the rest of this stuff. I'm really tired of it. Christians should be truth speakers. If you're going to speak plainly, put it out there. Don't do this type of thing. And some of them are doing that fairly clearly, but when they're doing that fairly clearly, it's very clear that they have abandoned the positions that only 18 months ago they were doing conferences on as being the means of saving America. But now, where will they be 18 months from now? Good question. That's a good question. So, okay, last thing as we get ready to sign off here, I just saw this meme posted. It's about redeemed Zoomer. Now, you've got reformed Zoomer and redeemed Zoomer, and evidently redeemed Zoomer is this young kid who is in a PCUSA because he's going to save the PCUSA. And he thinks that all the rest of us out here, well, I don't think he thinks Reformed Baptists are Reformed. He's one of those types of guys. But that anybody who left those denominations was capitulating. So, Machen, Warfield, Hodge, all the Princeton guys. And so it's got a tweet from April 6th of this year from Redeemed Zoomer. And the tweet reads, "Evolution is true, based, awe-inspiring, and God-glorifying. God can raise up children of Abraham from stones, so he can raise up children of himself from bacteria." And then the meme is, "This is it, my magnum opus. What do you guys think?" And there's a picture of some guy marked Christians, some guy marked scientists. They're both going. And then one guy, it's got a big old grin on his face, is the liberal apostate church he's saying he's reforming. It's going, yeah, I like that. I like that. I gotta admit, I see this kid posting stuff and I just shake my head and go, okay, I'm a little confused, but I'll just move on from here. Anyhow, all right. So in 1 hour and 22 minutes, I will be joining Dr. Tony Costa on his program yet once again, and we are going to be actually discussing Samuel Say's conversation with Corey Mahler, but obviously that's sort of a 1 week ahead of debate pre-show type of a situation. So if you want to, I thought I had posted that link. I lose track of things. So look up Tony Costa's webcast and join with us, because I know it's live because he has what do you call the super chat things where people donate money and stuff like that. Yeah, I know. We're the only people who don't do it, but there you go. But I'll be on with him, like I said, at 4:30 our time, which is 7:30 Eastern Daylight Time. No one's on Standard Time right now. No one. Well, we are. We are in Arizona, always are. But that's why we're the only people on this earth that understand the difference between Standard Time and Daylight Time, or people that live in Arizona, because we don't do it. I've lost track at least 4 times recently. Someone was setting up a time for me to be on, and they all said EST. And I said, but there's no one on EST. And they're like, what? Keith Flosky. Keith Flosky was like, what are you talking about? I said, did you play with your clocks a few weeks ago? Yeah. That means you're on Daylight Time. I didn't know that. They didn't know. Everybody I've talked to, the guy that the program I did Tuesday, same thing. He'd put EST, and I said, don't you mean EDT? I don't know, what's the difference? Because they don't ever have to deal with it. Everybody's doing it, so they never even have to give. They're always playing with their clocks, and so it's just like, well, whatever, It's like, yeah, okay. We're the only people that understand this mess. So anyway, which means probably Trump will end up forcing us to go permanently on daylight savings time, because that's what the talk is just make daylight savings time standard, which would mean we'd be back to it being the 1st of July, 10 o'clock at night. It's still bright outside and it's 114 degrees. You're trying to go to sleep. That's why we voted it out. Remember? What was it? 77, 78, I think we did it. And then we said, out of here. Forget it. Voted it right back out again. Yeah, that would be worth armed rebellion over. Come and get it, good boy. You just bring the army in and try to make us play with our clocks. We ain't going to do it. And besides that, outside of the universities, we still got a lot of guns in Arizona, so go away. Yeah, so there you go. All righty, guys. Thanks for listening to the program. Oh, by the way, next Tuesday, I'll be on with Chris Arnzen, Iron Sharpens Iron, also talking about the upcoming thing. So it's going to get covered in a lot of different ways, I would assume. Just pray that there won't be any technical difficulties. That's the one thing about non-in-person debates is, we've had the internet just go bloop down here, and so we'll find out. All right, thanks for watching. We will see you next time. God bless.